Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dave Edwards and I am the Chief Deputy Director here at OEHA and really excited to introduce today's webinar. So what we'll be seeing in today's webinar is the second. It's in a series of webinars that OEHA is hosting as part of our efforts to track and report on climate change and its impact on California. Each webinar synthesizes current scientific understanding on the featured topic and showcases examples of efforts to address related climate impacts. These examples are a small fraction of the work underway across California and elsewhere to develop and implement sustainable, equitable solutions to the challenges posed by climate change. This afternoon's webinar will focus on the impact of climate change on California's water resources and efforts to ensure a safe, reliable, sustainable water supply for our communities and ecosystems. Precipitation variability is a natural feature of the state's climate. However, more dramatic swings between extremely dry and extremely wet periods are becoming more frequent, as we have seen in the past decade. The term weather whiplash is now part of Californians' vocabulary. In December 2022, our concerns abruptly shifted from a continuing drought to heavy snow and extreme flooding. We saw one of the heaviest snowpacks in the state history in 2023. These shifts pose a critical challenge to managing our water resources. Our last climate indicators report was the product of collaboration with over 140 experts, including 40 tribes. In that spirit of partnership, OEHA is co-convening these webinars with our state agency partners and featuring distinguished speakers from multiple sectors. I'd like to thank our colleagues at the California Department of Water Resources and at the State Water Resources Control Board for working with us to produce today's discussion. I'd also like to welcome our expert speakers from the Community Water Center and the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. Thank you for joining us. Now I'll turn the webinar over to the Chief of our Climate Change Indicators team, Carmen Milano. Carmen?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to be joined today by a group of 5 speakers presenting 4 different talks on their efforts to understand and address the challenges posed by climate change on the state's water resources, each presenting a different perspective. We will have time following the talks today to answer questions and engage in discussion with all of our speakers. If you have questions, we ask that you use the Q&A function in chat to type in your question, or if you'd like to ask your question verbally, please raise your hand and we will invite you to unmute at that time. In the interest of time, we do ask that you pose questions of the speakers so that we are only reading off questions rather than comments. And also, please recognize that we may not have time to get to everybody's questions. And with that, it is always a pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker, Michael Anderson with the Department of Water Resources. Mike is the state climatologist and has had that position since 2007. This is a collaborative position between the state of California and the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, more easily known as NOAA, to provide climate data services for the state. He received his PhD and MS in Civil and Environmental Engineering from UC Davis, where he did extensive graduate and postgraduate work in hydroclimate system modeling, monitoring, and evaluation. As state climatologist, Mike has managed the Atmospheric River Research Program, working with the academic community and local and federal agencies to improve the understanding of these key contributors to flood events in California. He has contributed to the state's climate change assessments and has provided guidance to the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan since its inception in 2012. Currently, Mike works in the executive division of the Department of Water Resources, providing technical knowledge and advice for climate resilient resources management in a changing climate. Mike?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Get my screen shared here and we can get going. All right. There we go. Welcome to the webinar. Kick things off here by talking about tracking change and developing some work in climate resilient water management that we're doing at DWR. Opening graphic here shows the state mean temperature departure from the 1991 to 2020 average. This includes that last decade, 2011 to 2020. That includes much of the warming that we've seen. Even so, the last decade still stands out as significantly warmer than the historical average. So what we'll talk about today, describing change, tracking and reporting, and then talk about some of the work going on in the department on the climate resilient water management. But let's kick it off with that decade of extremes. We have had, since 2013, been considerably biased in our temperature sampling of the distribution, being at the warmest edge, either in the anomalous or extreme part of the distribution. 2023, one of our coldest years we've seen in a decade, only managed to get into the expected range, while the precip and snowpack were in the extreme wet. What we see is if you build your water management to function in the expected category, there aren't a lot of opportunities anymore for everything to work as planned, and some adaptation is required. So let's talk about water year 2023, quite an extraordinary year. As we entered the water year, we were looking and expecting another year of drought, and certainly the fall season did not disappoint in that category. In fact, all the way up until Christmas, we were extremely dry. Most places only having 20% of average precip for that time period. Things changed on a dime, though, in the next 18 days from December 27th to January 18th. We had winter in 3 weeks, essentially, and it didn't stop there. Even though there was a dry spell for about a month, we kicked back in with cold storms that produced massive amounts of snow, and then more atmospheric rivers in March that created the reemergence of the Tulare Lake bed. Some stats are there on the page for you in terms of how we hit the wet season there. And note that while the whole state didn't participate in this extreme wet, certainly in the middle part of the state, the northern part of the state was only about average. So the statewide total is only about 6%. And let us not forget that Tropical Storm Hillary provided some additional excitement there towards the end of the water year. One of the things that we're doing with the atmospheric research program is getting a climatology and a baseline for it. And one of those first steps is the Atmospheric River Catalog, which has been developed by the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, or CW3E. There are colleagues down at Scripps Institution of Oceanography that do a lot of the fundamental research in this area. And you can see some of the work that they have in here, including looking at the scale of the atmospheric rivers, which is a combination of how long they last and how much water vapor is moving. But you can also see the orientation, because how these atmospheric rivers impact our topography is really an important part of what the water outcome is. And it is nice to have a defined physical feature in the climate system that is responsible for most of our flooding, but their absence is a fundamental contribution to our droughts. Tracking change. We launched, as part of the last drought, a product called the California Water Watch. And I think the links are going to be put into the chat for you. But this is a way where the department pulled a lot of its data together and created some high-level graphics to give a sense of the state of the watersheds, looking at precip, temperature, snowpack, runoff, reservoirs, groundwater, And then working with some of our NASA partners and trying to get soil moisture and vegetation information through remote sensing. We're continuing to develop and evolve this particular application. So looking forward to seeing how this improves in telling the story of how the water year is evolving. Our colleagues up at Desert Research Institute, which happens to host Western Region Climate Center, my regional center that I work with, has developed climate trackers for each of the Western states. This was actually initiated by California. We were the first one to have them develop one for us. They thought it was such a good idea, they did it for the rest of the Western states. Tracks temperature and precipitation, and you can look at it state-wide down to the county level, and works on a monthly time step. So it works with monthly data from PRISM, so we can get back and have a long record from 1896 to the last month. The department really looks at trying to look at each year and kind of see how things are going. And so we focus on 5 areas important to water management: temperature, precipitation, snowpack, runoff, and sea level rise. Document the notable extremes and notable events and publish this. This has been a report that's published and placed on the state climatologist webpage in the department. We are trying to transition to a more dynamic content in a story map format for Water Year 2023's report. All right, want to talk here about trying to put everything together and really integrate the work in the department, covering everything from observing what's going on with our sensors on the landscape, in the air, and from space, to try and get a state of the watershed, understand the runoff that's happening, being able to use that information along with forecasts to help understand how we manage our surface reservoirs and how we can coordinate that with the ability to recharge groundwater systems that have been stressed by multiple years of drought. Work in the downstream in the floodplain region, a lot of where that work happens, and really doing a lot of coordination there, and not stopping there, really working and understanding the implications of sea level rise. So a lot of collaboration and coordination and communication going on within the department for one big picture. Now, how does this translate? Well, we publish a lot of items, and we put a big list here for you. So we have the water plan just came out, Central flood protection plan, updated every 5 years. The delivery capability report, this is what the State Water Project provides its contractors to allow them to evaluate their water supply reliability. They also have an adaptation plan. The climate department has climate action plan. We work in our planning unit with some watershed studies to really start to look at things from a watershed perspective. They've developed a weather sequence generator that can actually create climate change versions of weather sequences, so we can evaluate floods and droughts from this perspective of event by event. They're developing technical guidance documents to allow others to share and use that, and want to make sure, last but not least, that we coordinate with all the state level climate change documents. A lot of work going on, and again, a lot of integration needed to make sure this all speaks coherently to the challenges ahead. Now, one of the key elements to this is looking at watershed resilience and equity. And the department really has a focus on equity and looking at it from direct in-person engagement, both with our frontline communities, those communities that are experiencing the extremes and impacts of change first, as well as our tribal partners, and really working at it from a partnership perspective. And that includes language support. So when there's a need to maybe communicate more effectively in the language of the communities, we are working on that, and working also on targeted outreach, understanding some communities have issues that need special consideration, and then making sure all of that folds back up into our programs. And I've put down there, to work through all of these things that I've been speaking about, there are 3 elements that are fundamentally needed. We need communication, collaboration, and coordination. And with those 3 things, we have a pathway to success. So I'm going to finish up here and just say the past decade has shown us a greater and more frequent extremes across California. Tracking change enables us to better understand what's happening, when, and how, the nuances of climate change, which allow us to better develop and employ adaptation strategies to meet the challenge. It really is important to couple those planning efforts with community and tribal engagement, as well as our program implementation, so that we increase the collaborative adaptation capacity for the state of California. And with that, I am done, so I will stop sharing and we can move on to our next speaker.
Thank you, Mike. If you joined us late, we are waiting until the Q&A portion of the agenda to address any questions that you may have, but feel free to enter them in the Q&A. We will get to them during that allotted portion of the session today. However, I do encourage our speakers, if there is a question that can be addressed with a brief answer, please feel free to respond to the question, and that will become visible to all of our participants. So thank you, Mike. Mike always reminds me of the critical importance of data and monitoring to allow us to be a little more nimble on our feet in designing responses. Granted that water infrastructure is not something that can be described as something you can do nimbly. It takes many years, especially given the fact that our infrastructure was designed with historical conditions from over 50 years ago. Our next speaker is from a sister agency within Cali, PA, Chris Hyun. Let me find your bio. Chris is a senior scientist, and in that role at the State Water Resources Control Board, he is the state board's climate lead and lead for the water conservation emergency regulations. Chris has also helped draft the board's racial equity action plan. He is on the American Geophysical Union's Science and Society Executive Committee. And Chris has a PhD from UC Berkeley in energy and resources with a designated emphasis in developmental engineering and a master's from Banaras Hindu University in India. Chris?
Great, thank you. So hello. Following up from Mike's presentation on climate science and work at the Department of Water Resources, now we'll focus on how the State Water Board bolsters water resilience in the face of climate change. Please note that I will be providing a high-level overview of State Water Board programs, some of which are in the middle of regulatory processes. The State Water Board and our 9 regional boards make up a large, complex organization with numerous programs. So I will not be sharing details of each program, nor will I be taking official comments, but I will provide links to program pages so you can find details, updates, and how to send comments through the appropriate channels, and those will be provided in the chat. My aim is just to give you a taste of what the State Water Board is doing, and then point you in the right direction if you'd like more information. Next slide, please. So to clarify, many state organizations address climate impacts on water in California. Today, I'm focusing on how my organization, the State Water Board, addresses climate impacts. But often we work together with the Department of Water Resources, or DWR. Next slide, please. So to give a little context, as you know, global temperatures are rising due to climate change. Next slide. This leads to stressors like changing hydrologic patterns and sea level rise, which lead to hazards like extreme heat, wildfires, drought, and flooding, which impact health, infrastructure, and ecosystems. Next slide, please. 2 ways that climate hazards impact water resources are by 1, affecting water supply or water quantity, and 2, by changing water quality, like increasing water pollution and contamination. Both the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board that I'm a part of address these 2 issues. There is some overlap between these 2 types of impacts. Next slide, please. Over the next 20 years, California could lose 10% of its water supplies, according to the California Water Supply Strategy. This strategy addresses water quantity across the state. The supply strategy aims to offset increased evaporation due to global warming by capturing, recycling, desalting, and conserving more water, with goals for 2030 and goals for 2040. Both the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board are involved in this strategy. I will share 2 programs that are a part of the strategy that help save water quantity. Next slide, please. The first program is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. This program helps save groundwater quantity as well as quality, especially because during droughts, people use more groundwater, which also causes land subsidence and water quality issues. It's a program where the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board work together. The department collects and assesses groundwater sustainability plans, or GSPs, for if the department finds that a GSP is not compliant, then the State Water Board intervenes. For example, as of this past Tuesday, the Tulare Lake Subbasin is now subject to state reporting through the State Water Board. Current basins that may need state intervention are listed in the middle of this slide. Again, I will not be taking comments on this process, but please go to waterboards.ca.gov/SGMA to get more information and to be involved by providing public input. Next slide, please. This next program helps save water in urban areas. Like SGMA, this is a new program, the first time happening in California and possibly anywhere in the world. It's called Making Conservation a California Way of Life. It's a new way to manage urban water that aims to reduce water use across the state. Each large water supplier will have unique water efficiency goals. Again, the Department of Water Resources has helped with this program. Currently, the State Water Board is in the middle of rulemaking for this program. Again, I will not be taking comments on this rulemaking, but if you have questions, you can go to bit.ly/waterconservationreg for more information and contact information. Next slide, please. Along with water supply, which focuses on water quantity, we're also concerned about water quality. Studies on climate impacts and water quality can be found in the Indicators of Climate Change report by OEA. Also, the 5th National Climate Assessment summarizes climate impacts on water quality, as seen in this figure on the right. I'll share 2 programs that address water quality issues in the face of climate change. Next slide, please. The first focuses on drinking water quality. SAFER is the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. It provides funding and technical assistance for drinking water systems. Since 2019, SAFER has provided technical assistance through 300 projects and $700 million in funds to small disadvantaged communities for drinking water. SAFER also monitors water supply systems, focusing on drinking water quality along with drought risk, as seen in the map on the right. You can go to waterboards.ca.gov/SAFER for more information. Next slide, please. This second set of programs focuses on improving wastewater quality. The Clean Water Fund at the State Water Board prioritizes disadvantaged communities, improving on-site water treatment systems, and sustainability and climate change, especially for recycling water. As of August 2023, the funds had 211 applications with a total request for $5 billion, with an anticipated funding amount of $2 billion. Similar to SAFER's drinking water needs assessment, the State Water Board is developing a new wastewater needs assessment, which may factor in climate change metrics as well. You can find more information on our website, and the links are provided in the chat. Next slide. Finally, the State Water Board is committed to addressing racial equity. On the right is our racial equity resolution, which states the State Water Board commits to expanding implementation of the State Water Board's climate resolution to address the disproportionate effects of extreme hydrologic conditions and sea level rise on Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. This resolution also directed us to create a racial equity action plan. Next slide. The Racial Equity Action Plan includes climate-related goals. This slide shows the progress of our main climate goal. as well as a dashboard that shows the progress of our Racial Equity Action Plan as a whole. You can find the whole dashboard, and the one-year progress report at waterboards.ca.gov/racial_equity. Next slide. And finally, here are the members of the State Water Board Climate Team. I know this was a quick presentation, so feel free to contact us if you'd like more information.
Thank you, Chris. It's interesting to see the many multiple facets of the Water Board's efforts at addressing water resilience. Thank you for that high-level synthesis. And it's also notable to see that the Water Board is using metrics for tracking your progress at addressing climate change and equity. Okay, thank you. Again, if anyone has questions for Chris or Mike, please use the Q&A or raise your hand and we will invite you to unmute during the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Next up are two speakers from the Community Water Center. And I will introduce both of them. First, Justine Massey, who originally joined the Community Water Center as the 2018 legal intern and returned in 2020. Today, as policy manager and attorney, she focuses on policies and community engagement related to sustainable groundwater management. Some interesting facts about Justine. In 2019, she interned at UNESCO's International Hydrological Program in Montevideo, Uruguay. She has also contributed to a UN Special Rapporteur's report addressing climate change impacts. Justine holds a BA in Visual Arts from Stanford University and a certificate in visual production from the Universidad Nacional de las Artes in Argentina. She completed her law degree at UC Davis School of Law and received an environmental law certificate. Joining her today is her colleague, Kjia Rivers, who joined the Community Water Center in 2022 as a policy advocate working on drought, nitrate, and climate change-related drinking water issues. Originally from San Diego, Kjia attended the University of California in Santa Barbara, UCSB, and received a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies and Political Science. At UCSB, Kjia was able to learn about environmental justice issues and how vulnerable communities are often left out of the policy-making process. In addition to her studies, Kjia played on UCSB's volleyball team. I got too excited over that, and worked with UCSB CalPERG to advocate for policies that aim to reduce single-use plastics. So Justine and Kjia, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Hopefully we can build off of the great overviews that the previous two speakers presented and share more details about our work, particularly with disadvantaged communities in the San Joaquin Valley and on the Central Coast. So let's go to the next slide, please. At Community Water Center, our mission is to uphold the human right to water in California. We've been building the movement for water justice for about 18 years now under the leadership of co-founder and executive director Susana de Anda. And we work alongside directly impacted residents to advocate for more just water policies. Next slide, please. So really at the center of our work is California's human right to water. This right has always existed, as is the case with human rights, but it was formally recognized in California in 2012. And it guarantees that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable drinking water, and and that it's adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. It's also important to note that part of the law says that state agencies need to consider the human right to water in all of their decision making. So it doesn't just sit on the shelf, it's meant to be a lens to look at all of our decision making. Next slide, please. Okay, so we heard some preview about how climate change impacts drinking water availability. This slide is meant to summarize some of those different angles that put residents at risk as the great threat multiplier comes even more strongly into our lives. So one that we're all very familiar with here in California is drought. We know those are getting more frequent, more intense, longer, and that has a direct impact on dry wells and water quality, whether that means contaminants are getting pulled towards wells that weren't affected before, or concentrations are increasing as water levels drop. And of course, it's important to note that human activities generally also compound these threats, right? Climate change is human caused, so is groundwater over extraction. So we're trying to solve multiple problems at once, and communities are really stuck in the middle of all of that. Another way that climate change impacts drinking water is through severe flooding events. This can really directly mean contamination in wells. Most wells aren't perfectly sealed to be able to, be submerged and stay pristine. So as floods bring water from all over, including mixing with wastewater, that puts wells in danger. It also can block access for delivery of what we already call emergency bottled water delivery, right? So as we see in many examples of the chain of events that climate change can put in motion, our backups start to fail too. Sort of looping back perhaps to drought conditions, but not exclusively, extreme heat can also contribute to dry wells, creates danger at work, including increasing the demand for access to drinking water and water to cool oneself with while at work. A lot of the communities we work with are farm working communities, so they don't have the luxury of staying inside in air-conditioned homes, for example, while these extreme events are happening. And the extreme heat can also cause electricity problems, which affects people's ability to pump water out of their wells. Also, in communities, we see a lot of reliance on swamp coolers, which rely on water combined with, fans to try to cool. And so as those pieces fall away, they get put in even graver danger. And I wouldn't say finally, because I'm sure there are a lot of other factors that just aren't mentioned here, but last on this list is sea level rise. As I mentioned, we work with communities on the Central Coast, so they are, again, on the front lines of this issue, seeing contamination in their wells increasing from year to year, which affects their ability to drink that water and affects their livelihoods, as this can cause crops to fail as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So I wanted to mention, nowadays we sort of use this term disadvantaged communities and expect that everyone knows what that means. But there's a legacy of why these communities are disadvantaged. And it has a lot to do with historic discrimination and planning decisions. So this was an example from the Tulare County General Plan. they identified specific communities to no longer invest in because they considered them non-viable. This plan was put in place around 1970, or at least that was the last time it was updated before 2009. And one of the main community groups that Community Water Center works with is called AGUA, Asociación de Gente Unida por el Agua, or People United for Water. And it was really organized around this in 2005 through door knocking to let them know, like, hey, did you know that your community has more or less been blacklisted to not receive any more investments? What do you think of that? How is your water? Do you trust it? And the movement continued to build from there. So perhaps you're familiar with some of these communities. They're very much still around. So designating something as non-viable, really all it did was make life much harder for the people who continue to live there. It didn't result in any increased efficiency or whatever the goal was at the time. So this is the situation that we're having to catch up with as we head into even more challenging times. And next slide, please. Okay, I just want to briefly touch on this to give a picture of what we're facing. This was the average amount of days over 100 degrees in Visalia, which is in the Central Valley, in the past time period, right, between 1970 and 2000. And next slide. This is how many days are anticipated to be over 100 degrees in the upcoming time period. And this doesn't even get into what those extremes will look like, right? As we've seen it hitting at least 115 degrees, sometimes for a week straight. So the extremes are extreme. Next slide. I'm happy that we brought this here today because we saw in the previous presentation, the far, I think it should be on the right of your screen portion, starting at 1850. This gives a broader view of what temperatures have been throughout the history of the Earth, as far as we can tell. Humans, as far as we know, like modern civilization, let's say, comes into play at about 10,000 years ago, or 10,000 BC. And you can see a really amazingly stable climate, right? And now we're leaving that. And I perhaps am using some poetic license, but I like to mention that it's amazing to me that by burning fossil fuels, we might actually be returning to the temperatures that the dinosaurs thrived in. And suffice to say, we don't know if humans can make it, let alone with the challenges that we've been talking about. And I just really want to underscore, this is why it's so important to not only adapt, but to also mitigate. This isn't locked in, and we need to make sure that temperatures stay at a reasonable range. I'm going to pass it now to my colleague Kjia, and apologies for going over on my time, Kjia. I hope you can hit your important points here. Thanks.
And no worries. Next slide, please. Thank you. So like the temperatures Justine mentioned earlier, because of that, frontline communities on the Central Coast and the Central Valley that we work closely with are in this whiplash between extreme drought and flood, as we've talked about earlier in our webinar. But I wanted to bring out some real life experiences and what that looks like. On the bottom left photo, it shows flooding of the historically dry Tulare Lake. And the top two photos show flooding that happened in Pajaro Valley, both of these events happening last year. And the flooding that happened in Pajaro Valley was mainly due to a breach in the levee, which caused the community of Pajaro to flood, impacting thousands of residents. And it really shows how our infrastructure can't keep up with the current climate change impacts that we're experiencing right now. However, to respond to this disaster, our CWC team on the Central Coast supported the community of Pajaro to ensure that communities whose wells were impacted by the flooding, either inundated with water, floodwater, or contamination caused by the flooding, had access to bottled water. We're also coordinating with other NGOs and state agencies to determine the flood response and proactive recharge strategies, really prioritizing water quality monitoring. So big influxes of water can be beneficial and are not harmful to water supply. Yeah, and then also the bottom right photo is another example of how community infrastructure is also at risk due to neglect and exclusion, and also the climate change extremes that we're going to experience or experiencing currently. Next slide, please. This is a slide really demonstrating seawater intrusion impacting the Central Coast, limiting water supplies in the face of climate change. The dark red areas are areas that have already been intruded by seawater. Next slide, please. And then really just putting in the crisis that we're going into. By 2040, we predict that 12,000 domestic wells could go dry, putting 126,000 residents at risk of losing access to water. Next slide, please. And then also, we really want to highlight the California Water Plan, specifically how it focuses on water and climate change. And this visual shows the vulnerability of the Tulare Lake region to climate change. It also demonstrates a high percentage of residents in disadvantaged communities on the front lines of this crisis. Not pictured on the slide, I also wanted to bring attention to the water plan's emphasis on natural systems, playing a crucial role in climate resilience and climate mitigation, which is overall supported by the communities we work with, as we talk about a bit later. Next slide, please. So for CWC, we work towards community climate resilience in order to increase drinking water resilience in these communities. So Community Water Center helped sponsored a bill, SB 552, in order to promote a comprehensive state, county, and small water supplier planning and preparation. So under SB 552, small water suppliers are required to make drought resilience plans, or they're supposed to meet something called a minimum resiliency requirement, which will help them prepare for drought shortage, drought issues, and climate change. So for example, small water suppliers are directed under this bill to have sufficient water quality monitoring for their wells, a backup well and backup power generator to make sure those can stay on. And CWC overall helps spread awareness about these requirements and their importance for climate resiliency and drought resiliency to frontline communities. Under this bill, there's also an interagency task force in order to coordinate on drought response and planning across the state, which my colleague Justine participates in to promote or elevate drinking water needs for frontline communities. And we also provide feedback to the county drought resilience plans to add that drought planning at a local level as well. Some other work that Community Water Center works on is different regulatory processes in order to preserve the drinking water resources we have left, such as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which Chris talked about briefly before, otherwise known as SGMA, and then other nitrate regulatory programs, both in the Valley and on the Central Coast, which were overall established to limit the amount of nitrate farmers are allowed to put into groundwater and ultimately impact drinking water. Lastly, we work to support a just land transition by engaging in programs such as the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program, which is a program which provides the initial incentives for a just land transition from extractive agriculture. So under this program, farmland is repurposed into different uses and they're supposed to prioritize new uses of farmland to benefit nearby communities most impacted by climate change and drinking water scarcity. Next slide, please. And we work closely with residents to understand what this just transition looks like away from industrial agriculture to more climate resilient uses. Under the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program, our community advocacy team has submitted an application by proposing to shift farmland located near the community of West Goshen in the Central Valley, which is impacted by both dry wells and nitrate contamination and other contaminants, into a community garden to have some relief from pollution and over-extraction. Communities have also shared with us that there needs to be an overall increase in green infrastructure, and as a result, we advocate for actions which would restore natural systems to mitigate climate change impacts, such as parks, reforestation, wetland restoration, utilizing creeks for recharge, and all of those things would provide shade and recreation as well as relief from climate change impacts. Lastly, our community solutions team works diligently to provide technical assistance work to communities impacted by lowered groundwater levels and decreased water quality in order to be resilient to the climate change impacts, which will further strain those. So adding another layer of resilience. Next slide, please. And if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to take them in the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kjia and Justine. We think it's so important to highlight successful efforts by groups such as yours, thinking that your work could serve as a model for other organizations to work with communities. So thank you. Now for our last speaker, Adekunle Oho is the manager of the water resources at San Bernardino Valley, a regional water agency serving the water and environmental needs of the central and eastern portion of the Inland Empire. It is the 5th largest state water project contractor. Adekunle is a proud member of professionals responsible for a variety of water policy and resources development programs and projects spanning imported and local water supply, water quality, and integrated resources planning. Adekunle?
All right. Thank you for the people still on the webinar. As introduced, I'm Adekunle Ojo from San Bernardino Valley, and I'm pleased to be wrapping up this webinar with the good news that we can indeed serve the evolving water needs, both quantity and quality-wise, of people and the environment in a changing climate. That's what my agency and our partners are doing every day. To situate you, San Bernardino Valley, 70 years ago, the people of this area, they formed this agency during a long-term drought with a primary goal of finding supplemental water. And that ultimate supplemental water source came from the State Water Project, which was called the Feather River Project at that time. And over the years, we've evolved into the 5th largest state water contractor. The water master and the groundwater manager of 4 groundwater basins, And on top of that, we manage, a lot of ecosystems and habitat. And I just want to know, on the scale, we directly serve about 710 people that are served by 15 retail agencies. But if you look at the number of people that are dependent on the surface and groundwater resources of our area, from Riverside to San Bernardino, from Fontana to Yucaipa, we're talking about around 2 million people. So about 2 years ago, when we were working on a strategic plan, our mission was crafted as working collaboratively to provide a reliable and sustainable water to support the changing needs of our region's people and environment. Again, to emphasize that we serve both the people as well as the environmental needs of area. And this area, particularly also have a lot of disadvantaged communities, low-income communities. And sustaining the groundwater resources is very essential for us because that is the least cost water to most, to most water providers, whether they're a mutual water company or a city or a special district. So maintaining the quantity as well as the quality of our groundwater resources is paramount in our work. So I know you might be wondering now, where's San Bernardino Valley? We sit on top of the Santa Ana River watershed, which is the largest coastal stream in Southern California. So it's about 90 minutes east of Los Angeles. And we sit below the San Bernardino Mountains as well as the San Bernardino National Forest. So we're blessed, with at least getting snow in the mountain front that helps feed some of the streams and rivers that flows ultimately down the Santa Ana River all the way to Newport Beach in Orange County, where it enters into the Pacific Ocean. I give you that context because that location means we have to be stewards of the surface water resources, the groundwater resources, and the ecosystem services and natural resources provided by the river system. However, that location also, despite the being a great location, for example, we're in the 26th year of a local drought. With the exception of a few years, precipitation has been trending below historic average. So one of the points I want to emphasize here is that as Michael and other speakers alluded to in the presentation, is that the future climate and weather conditions do not look like the past, which means we have to plan and build projects to support water supply as well as water quality. Aridity, wildfire, weather whiplash that we've been witnessing in recent years have put our planning to the test. But we know that we have to accept this and plan for a future that's resilient to these factors, and more. We have to plan for the long term to address a changing climate, which means, for our agency, we have to take a portfolio approach. Again, we're stewards of groundwater resources, 4 large groundwater basins with combined storage of about 10 million acre feet. We have to secure that, but then we have to add on top of that, capture local stormwater when it's available, save that in the groundwater for the future. We use recycled water to meet flow in the river for fish and other indigenous habitat, and the balance we recharge that again in the groundwater basin for future use. Now it doesn't always rain locally, so we are part of the Stillwater project, which brings imported water that contributes 20 to 25% of the local need on average each year. And then on top of that, we see people and the water efficiency aspect as as integral to our water supply portfolio. And one of the points I want to make here is that each portion of this portfolio as both climate stressors, hazards, and impacts associated with it, and by their interaction overall, we're resilient, because, maybe when you don't have local, surface water, you have imported water. Or when you reduce, water use and the recycled water, declines, you can probably supplement, that with stormwater capture. So they interact. I also want to mention, the holistic approach, we take to climate resilience, and I'm going to point out a couple of things, that we use, a restorative, science-based, holistic, integrated approach, to manage, the threat as well as the climate opportunity. So it's not about doom and gloom. It's really a change set of variables from historic conditions that we need to consider and incorporate into a planning as well as project. So one of the things we're doing is to build projects that anticipate larger wet years and longer droughts. So you can think of it as a system of systems that we can utilize the resources when they are available. So we've been very proactive in our investment and engagement. So I highlighted, right now is one of the projects that we call the Enhanced Recharge Project. I'm going to talk about more in the next slide, and that is 80,000 acre-feet of stormwater capture. One that I'm particularly proud of is what we call the Sunrise Ranch. This was a property that was already master planned, for about 3,600 new homes. And after a lot of opposition to that project, our agency decided, to buy that property, bought it for about $32 million. And what was planned to be 3,600 homes now is going to be used for climate resilience. There's going to be a habitat mitigation bank there. There might be wildfire mitigation opportunities there, and a couple of things that ultimately removes the demand that would have come from those 3,600 homes. Now you might be wondering, what is the implication for that, for California, affordable housing? Those, homes will probably get built in other communities. The other one I'll briefly touch on is the Foothill pipeline crossing, City Creek. That's an essential infrastructure, not only for our agency, but for a neighboring agency called the San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency. So planning for bigger storms, we know we have to take that pipeline deeper, build a tunnel, and bury that pipeline so that it doesn't get taken out in a big storm. So again, those are some of the things we're doing, to adapt to a future climate. And you can see we're investing with in statewide storage, optimizing groundwater basin, trying to invest in the Delta to improve the conveyance as well as the science. So we're taking an integrative approach. This is one the project I talked about earlier. You could see the mountain in the background. This is 20 new recharge basins where we're able to capture stormwater up to 80,000 acre-feet of it in a year, which represent about a third of the demand, annual demand in the San Bernardino Basin. And one of the things that's exciting about this project is that it's 30 years in the making. The construction is taking place in an active habitat area, and this project, right now, of the 20 recharge basins, 5 have been completed. We have put in water, both imported water as well as local stormwater capture into these basins. And this project is making the habitat better, and we thank our partners like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for working with us, for building trust together and collaborating to making sure that, we can meet the need of people and the environment in a changing climate. So in this picture is the Seven Oaks Dam, which is the uppermost dam on the Santa Ana River watershed, and it's within a service area. And the point I'm trying to make, in this slide is that the future is here. And the future maybe arrived too early than we anticipated. But again, the future is everything we can do that we have not yet done. And we are ready to deliver the future as San Bernardino Valley. Again, we're taking a programmatic approach. So Watershed Connect is a regional funding mechanism. We're doing a forecast informed reservoir operations at Seven Oaks Dam. We have an habitat conservation plan to secure the permitting for 50 years for all the water supply project, grid resilience project, energy project that we have, along with our partners. We're investing in, along with CAL FIRE, along with the U.S. Forest Service and other partners in the headwaters above a service area where the snow and the streams originate from, to keep those forests healthy. And as I mentioned earlier, we are in the business of recycled water too, taking a regional approach to managing that supply. And all of these things and more fits into our climate adaptation and resilience plan, which has things like even PFAS, regional study, a regional salt mitigation study, everything that's ensuring that we have water, both in quantity and in the right quality, to meet the evolving needs of the people and the environment of our region, irrespective of the weather or the climate of the future. Again, we're taking a programmatic, all of business approach to regional resilience, and we're funding science, adaptive management, habitat investment, headwaters investment, greenhouse gas mitigation, more resilient design and construction. And all of this will not be possible without having a supportive and a trusting board, climate fluent CEO and general manager, as well as staff and stakeholders that are increasingly invested in climate resilience. So what are my three key takeaways today is that, one, we can meet the needs of people and the environment through science-based decisions, building trust, and partnerships and collaborations. All of the things we do involve partners. There's no siloed approach anymore. And all the things that we can do alone, they've been done. So everything we do now involve partners and collaborations. And collaborations and partnerships require trust, as well as science-based decision-making. We need to be proactive. We need to plan and act for the long term, because many of these projects take no time. The enhanced recharge project that I was talking about was probably started, the design and the planning and the environmental probably started as far back as 1999. And we're doing the second phase of construction, starting last year. And then, finally, we need to connect people with water and climate by meeting people where they are, rather than waiting for them to, to come to us. They might not come to a board meeting. They might think they're not even interested in water or climate. But if there is an able group that is doing composting or addressing climate change at the neighborhood level or whatever it is, we go to them, we engage with them, we understand what they're doing, and we build those relationships. And I think, that concludes my presentation. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for having me on this panel. And I look forward to great questions and discussion.
Thank you, Adekunle. We had a question for you in the Q&A that may have already been partially answered. So the question directed at you, Adekunle, is the Seven Oaks Dam was intended primarily for flood control. Are you able to tap any of the water stored behind the dam? And then a further follow-up to that from the same person is, are you primarily investing in solutions upstream of the dam, or do you have something like a conversation pool behind the dam?
All right, let me take those questions, one by one. No, yes, no, it's true that right now the dam is authorized for flood control purposes only, and we're working to get water conservation authorized. However, because we knew that we wanted to do conservation, at the dam, the water conservation features were built in. So right now, even though the dam is not operated, for water conservation purposes, we can still do some water conservation. However, when the lawsuit, regarding that is settled and we complete FERA, we think we'll be able to maximize the use of that facility for water conservation. Right now, it's just operated, for flood control, and we just carp as much water as we can. And so it's not optimized for water conservation, but that, in a few years, we think, that we'll get there. On the conservation pool, yeah, there's a conservation pool right now, but it's very, it's very tiny. And FERA will also help us, size, the right conservation pool. And then the last part of the investment, is that the way our habitat conservation plan is, there's some of our habitat investment that are above the dam, and there's some that are below the dam, and they have to be managed differently because of the temperature differential below and above the dam, as well as water temperature and other considerations. So we have a couple of translocation project that is supposed to move some of the habitat for the soccer above the dam and provide a thriving ecosystem for them. I hope that answers that person's question.
Okay. I would like to ask all of the speakers to please turn their camera on for the remainder of this webinar. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. I do have my own, so I'm just gonna start with my question. I think all of you touched on the importance of partnerships and collaboration, and of course, communication is a huge component of that. So I'd like to hear each of your thoughts on what has worked for you. If you could think of an example of one or two effective partnerships, particularly involving communities. What are some strategies, tools, how you get started, anything you'd like to share that you thought worked really well? And part of me is also thinking in 2023, Mike, when that parade of atmospheric rivers hit, a lot of folks were saying, oh, drought's over. No need to conserve. So, that I think part of that is relaying and sharing a lot of the science-based data and metrics, and the scientific understanding behind precipitation, the variable nature of precipitation in California, and how that's changing. So maybe we could start with you, Mike.
You bet. So again, being able to develop relationships is a big step towards having success when you work with your local partner. And I think it was mentioned by many of the other panelists about building those relationships establishes trust, the ability to engage and have meaningful conversations that allow you to find a workable space and reach the potential for solutions. So that was the first part. Now we get to the last part. We were talking about, in water year 2023, where we had essentially winter in 18 days, and everybody's thinking, well, it's great. Everything's taken care of. It was really helpful to actually have products like the California Water Watch, where you could show surface water systems in parts of the state were definitely being restored, and then some. There was also infrastructure damage, as noted by the speaker, particularly around Pajaro. But having graphics, communication tools that show just how big the state is and how variable conditions are across it, and where you might still have dry wells, even though the rivers above are flooding. And seeing that then enabled the opportunity to say, hey, might be a giant flood, but let's take advantage of the opportunity, and what can we do in terms of getting some of that water into groundwater, working collaboratively with the board to identify those opportunities, working collaboratively with the local communities and finding out, hey, a pinch point, having CARB certified equipment, so the California Air Resources Board, to draw water out and into fields for recharge. So working together, able to set up an emergency contract and remove that barrier. So there's a whole lot in there about developing trust, being able to communicate, identify needs and barriers, and then finding those opportunities to overcome them, to take advantage of opportunity amidst the extremes.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, one of the lessons that we learned last year, in the midst of, we had a wet winter, on the Stillwater project, we got 100% allocation for the first time in a long time. But that was also coupled with a lot of rain. It actually snowed, down here, in the valley floor for the first time in many years, So, but one thing we realize is that, people sometimes don't understand how the water system, works or interact, the local. We had people, questioning why we're not recharging, more water, and in some of those cases, and we're not talking about even, the general public. We're talking about people who we thought were seasoned water managers. Asking some of these questions, then we realize that we've been making certain assumptions that people just know some of this stuff. So it's like going back to the basics. And why you cannot recharge in a flood control basin, when there's rain in the forecast, how you can't do this, and how recharge, rate, reduces if you've been recharging nonstop for 3 months. So I think it's improved our education and engagement efforts, just knowing that we can't take things for granted in terms of what people know.
I can jump in next.
Yes.
So you asked what's been successful. I think one of the things that allows us to do our work effectively is that we have recurring meetings with impacted residents. And that sounds really simple, but it's what allows us to be accountable to how things actually play out within communities. So we don't just get stuck in the theoretical. And then Kjia and I in particular are on the policy team of our organization. And so we kind of jump back and forth between what's the lived experience and then what does the law say that the state actually is responsible for achieving. And then we can elevate what we hear from residents, return to them with proposed solutions from state agencies, let them know what are the active regulatory programs that are underway and which way are they headed, and then give them a chance to intervene, contribute. It's not a perfect process in any way, but actually having multiple conversations over time, again, sounds so simple, but that's what allows our perspectives and our advocacy positions to evolve over time, and ideally to really meet needs. So that's what I would say is successful. And for others who are looking to build those kinds of relationships, NGOs can be helpful in making connections or having consultations. Existing community meeting spaces, you know, if you can find those, ask permission to join, and listen to what the concerns are. That's another way to learn about how our actions as decision makers really affect people. And in terms of flooding, I suppose, I don't know. I think that I would say most of the residents that we work with knew that drought was coming back. There was a lot of excitement about the rain. And we talked about how to, at the same time, prepare for potential negative impacts. As we mentioned, you know, folks are really at risk of physical harm in these extremes. So we want to make sure that while we celebrate times of plenty, that we also have emergency plans for how to stay put in your house for an extended amount of time if you needed to, or an escape route also, and factoring in disability needs. A lot of the residents we work with are physically affected by the contamination that they've been exposed to. And so that makes it harder for them to be resilient just in their own bodies too. And we need planning for that.
And I think quickly, from a state perspective, and I think Aliha would understand this as well, sometimes it's difficult as a state entity to understand who should be representative, who should be our partners, because we have like 39 million residents in California. And so who should speak up about any one program. And so one way I think we do that is by making sure that certain populations are heard. I know with the Sigma program at the State Water Board, ensuring that tribal nations are heard. I'm sure that's with other groups as well. And then also creating advisory groups is another way that that's done. With the wastewater needs assessment, advisory group was put together. And I know for SAFER, there's been you know, a 20-member advisory group put together as well that they meet 4 times a year. So there's different ways. I think that's a pretty successful partnership to make sure that various folks are representative, not just quote unquote experts in let's say Western science, but people with various cultural backgrounds and traditional knowledges as well.
Thanks, Chris. I want to go back to Justine because there was a question in the chat about Tulare Lake. It was dry because of overpumping. So how do we balance human right to water with human desire to use water for various uses? And that's just one example. Maybe after Justine, I invite the other speakers if you have thoughts, not necessarily specific to Tulare Lake, to also jump in. So Justine?
Yeah, and is it okay if I pass it to?
Of course. Or Justine or Kjia, I'm like.
Thank you, Carmen. Yeah, thank you for the question about balancing human right to water and other uses for water. I think that it really comes down to sustainably managing our resources, specifically groundwater resources. It's basically a finite resource. It's hard to recharge and get new water back into our groundwater. And it's really there for a lot of the population for different uses, but households and families depend on groundwater for drinking water. So in order to balance that, I think there should be a sustainable balance between using that for agriculture, industrial, other uses, and ensuring that there's supply to ensure that humans, residents have their rights met through the human right to water. So I guess more concrete, effective implementation of like the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This doesn't really touch on Tulare Lake Basin, but also ensuring that the groundwater that we have left is still drinkable by ensuring that pollution doesn't get into those sources. So really just sustaining or being sustainable with our use of resources.
Great, thank you for that. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I think I'll add also, since this past Tuesday, State Water Board did adopt a resolution that put the Tulare Lake subbasin under probation. And so there's a lot of regulatory things in place right now due to this SGMA, or Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that helps basins to make sure that all voices are heard and also the science is understood in terms of how much water is in the basin and how it's getting extracted. And so there is a lot of review process of reaching out to various interested parties. And I think that's part of the key, is making sure that various interested parties are heard. And so this is a long process. It takes a while for our SGMA team to review a GSP or a plan to make sure that both the science and the interested parties are accounted for. And I would encourage people to go to waterboards.ca.gov/SGMA to get the latest on that, because it's a new, this is the first time that a subbasin has ever been put under probation. And so there's a lot of unprecedented work happening through both DWR and the State Water Board on this.
Well, speaking of unprecedented work, there was a point that you made in one of your slides, Chris, that I was hoping you would elaborate on. You talk about this rulemaking called Making Conservation a California Way of Life. Can you just talk a bit more about that? And my own personal question is, it sounds like there's a behavioral component just based on the name. I could be wrong. So if that is the case, could you address the role of state board action or rulemaking in influencing behavior?
Sure. Again, yeah, there are multiple things there. So number one, I think at urban centers and cities and towns across California, we're concerned about the efficiency of water use. We want to use correct water efficient appliances. We want to have water efficient and climate ready lawns and landscapes and parks, and also commercial businesses and institutions. We want them to be water efficient as well. And so one of the ways to do that this Making Conservation a California Way of Life focuses on is creating water use objectives for the larger water suppliers, around 400 plus water suppliers across California, which have around 3,000 water connections or more, will have these water objectives uniquely made for their water system. And so it's not just everyone do a 15% decrease of water use. It is, we are calculating your hydrologic climate, your the vegetation, and all of these elements go into this regulation to determine unique water objectives. And so as a state entity, we can coordinate with these 400 plus water suppliers to have these, but then it's up to the water suppliers and the municipalities to determine, how then do we make our water use more efficient? Then they are the ones locally communicating and creating structures so that their service area, the residents, the commercial businesses, and the institutions in their service area, then they work with them to understand, okay, do we need to do some landscape transformation? That can include, replacing lawns with climate appropriate vegetation and trees, or different things like that, or helping businesses to make their water use more efficient. So then it's up to the local areas to determine, what type of behavior they want to encourage to change.
So it's their challenge, not the state boards.
Yes, and we try to support them in different ways. So there is SaveOurWater.com, which is a state program. And so that provides different resources and tips on how to save water in these various sectors.
And may I just add something there? I don't work closely in that program, but when we talk with residents in rural communities, sometimes they are working so hard to conserve water because they have this deeply lived experience of water shortage, they end up allowing all of the vegetation, even, you know, decades old trees to die around them. And so, you know, they have a lot of interest in green spaces, and yet and they know the benefits that that can have to their soil, the ability to absorb water when it is available. And yet they're feeling the pressure to be part of the solution in terms of water conservation. So I liked your phrasing, Chris, you know, moving, for example, from lawns to climate appropriate landscaping. And I hope that the state can continue to be even more clear about what that looks like, because it doesn't necessarily look like plastic astroturf or dry land, right? Like, we need the natural systems so that our water systems stay intact.
Yeah, totally agree. And this regulation is probably the first time that climate-ready landscape is defined in the state. And we do want to make sure that, especially in disadvantaged communities, that they have the capacity and the urban greening funding to do that transformation. This, again, is for larger water suppliers, which will be regulated. But even within those larger water suppliers, there are smaller suppliers with large disadvantaged community neighborhoods in their service areas. So we want to make sure that we're reaching out to them specifically. We had, you know, earlier, I think this year, reached out to those suppliers, created a priority list and reached out to those suppliers specifically to make sure they understand what's in the regulation and the impacts they have on those systems, and what kind of feedback that they have.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I don't see any raised hands. We have about 4 minutes left, so I am going to take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers, Mike, Chris, Kjia, Justine, and Adekunle. We really appreciate you joining us and taking the time to share your thoughts and perspectives with us. And with that, I will ask for our, it's already up. Another big thank you. This webinar is brought to you by not just OEHA, but by our colleagues at the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Resources Control Board. As I believe Dave Edwards mentioned in his opening remarks, OEHA is hosting a series of webinars and partnerships with various state agencies. Our next one is in partnership with the Department of Public Health. It seems that infectious diseases as a phenomenon influenced by climate change doesn't get as much airtime as heat or wildfire smoke or the physical stressors. And so in May, we will be listening to the Department of Public Health scientists talk about the various infectious diseases associated with climate change. We hope that you join us for that. There should be a link in the chat for the our webinar webpage with the registration link. Also, there will be a recording of this afternoon's webinar, also accessible from the same webpage, and we expect to have the recording in the next week or two. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.